we really want to zoom out for a moment here and get an understanding of how can we unlock some of this potential, both in terms of public and private investment. What should government maybe be focused on, not just for automotive, but across the logistics industry, and where we can prioritize investment. It's kind of, it feels like an appropriate time to be doing this as well, since there's a weirdly kind of a general election happening today in a small corner of the country, which for you, those of you not from the UK, we won't get into as to why that is. But obviously policy matters a lot when it comes to the logistics industry. And we have the perfect speaker to talk to you about that. So I'm very pleased to hand over to present Ben Garrett, who's the Acting Policy Director at Logistics UK. And Ben will talk a little bit more about that association, but great to have you with you, Ben.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers, okay, cool. Great. Thank you for that introduction, that kind of introduction. Yeah, it's a bit of a pivot on what we've heard so far. When a colleague suggested I come and talk to a bunch of experts on automotive logistics with my general sort of logistics policy approach, I thought that was quite daunting. So hopefully I'll say some things that you find interesting. I'll touch on automotive a bit, but I'd expect you all to know a lot more than me about that specifics. But I'll talk a bit about how we've described it to policymakers. Just to give you a sense of who we are, so I work for Logistics UK. We're one of the country's largest trade associations. We've got over 20,000 members. And those are businesses right across the logistics supply chain. So we're talking about those in road and rail and water, inland and short sea shipping, as well as those that deliver the logistics infrastructure that we rely on, so that warehouses, ports and airports, as well as a lot of the customers of logistics, which is actually how we started as an organisation over 100 years ago. With I think Coleman's Mustard and Cross and Blackwell getting together with the Lord Mayor of London to complain that the rail freight companies were charging them too much. So we've sort of transitioned over the years, and now we're both the customers and the deliverers of logistics. And unlike at the beginning, when it was a very sort of, I guess, inward-facing, sort of B2B of manufacturers talking to freight operators, we're now much more outward-facing, representing the logistics sector to policymakers. And our mission in doing that is to support, shape and stand up for safe, sustainable and efficient logistics. That's what we are trying to get at. And then, what gets us in the door to talk to policymakers about some of the issues that we're facing? Some of them that will be very specific to you are that we're one of the UK's largest sectors. People find that quite surprising, that 8% of the UK workforce works in logistics in some fashion. That could be, as well, 1.5 million people working in logistics companies, and about 1 million others working in logistics roles in non-logistics businesses, with a huge variety of roles within that. Every year we delve into this data in something called the Logistics Report. We publish it every June. So we've just published the 2026 report, and that goes into some of this sort of employment data and GVA data, and the issues facing the sector. But it updates the GVA figure each year. So this is a couple of weeks old, this figure, that it's now 175 billion GVA impact for the economy. That's a direct impact, but obviously the reason why people work with logistics businesses and those in the sector isn't for their own direct impact, it's for the indirect impact, for the services they deliver to others. So we're working with some experts at the moment to help us work out that indirect and catalytic impact, talk a bit more about the impact that we have. The sector is also a significant attractor of inward investment. That could be investment in a modern facility full of automation. It could be investment in a port, airport. There's a lot of that going on at the moment, with some on the sort of airport side of things. a bit more progress announced today by the government on Heathrow, with the next consultation announced on that. We want to see that happen as a major freight hub for the country. So as I mentioned, it's big, but so what? It's more about what it does for others that matters. It's there to deliver everything people need everywhere, every day. That could be businesses such as yourselves, but obviously it stretches also to homes, public services, utilities, with a huge amount of material being moved around the country. There are some stats there showing quite the enormity of how much is moved each year. As you can see, it's quite domestically quite road dominated. A lot, obviously, for not road, largely for international. That's all about aviation and maritime. But a significant amount moved by rail, and even more than that moved by water. That's mainly short sea shipping as opposed to inland waterways. But there is some movement by inland waterways. And there is a constant, I guess it's going on for quite now, 20 years or so now, push to get more of this material moved not on the road. Policymakers understand that for other modes of transport there would almost always be a road component at either end, but there's a significant push to get more on waterway and rail in particular, with rail having a rail freight growth target to meet. We'll see who's held accountable for meeting that freight growth target, if anyone. That's one of the things to bottom out over the next year or so. So it does everything for everyone, and that includes this sector. A huge amount of logistics movement in automotive, in everything from the mining of the raw materials to the movement of that material to the initial components being manufactured, getting those components to facilities in the UK and elsewhere, getting those components not just in time, but just in sequence for the assembly of vehicles, and then also the logistics of moving those finished products for sale in the UK and abroad. Thousands of movements involved in that, and that means that the performance of the logistics sector has a particular bearing on the efficiency, productivity of the automotive sector compared to a sector with more simpler movements. There are more stages for things to go right and more stages for things to go wrong. So in thinking about that, some thinking actually we did around, that reflects a bit of thinking we did around a year ago, well, a bit more than a year ago, ahead of the industrial strategy, where we knew that the government was going to be earmarking advanced manufacturing, including automotive, as a key part of the industrial strategy amongst its 8 growth-driving sectors. And we wanted to make sure that policymakers understood that logistics played a key role in that advanced manufacturing supply chain, as well as in around 4 of the other much more very physical areas of physical growth sectors that were earmarked in that same space, including defence, which also includes a lot of advanced manufacturing in similar space to your own. And then we married that with some work that we did with Oxford Economics in 2023, where we wanted to understand and quantify more for ourselves and for policymakers why it is that logistics efficiency has an impact on the wider economy. This is an infographic in the middle here that Oxford Economics put together for us, but essentially it did find that logistics performance drives productivity. It directly lowers, efficient logistics directly lowers costs for transport, it improves reliability, and it creates new market connections, and that's obviously a direct benefit for the automotive sector. And then beyond that by delivering those things, that creates the conditions to grow access to markets, to boost competition, and in turn increase domestic innovation and investment, as well as improving resource utilization, which is a benefit not just to the sectors using logistics, but for the economy as a whole. And as I mentioned, the more complex the supply chain is, with this sector having a very complex one, the more opportunities there are to either push up that productivity and performance or to pull it down. Also, what Oxford Economics found, we asked, if we could get this right. Next slide. If we could get this right, what would that mean for the economy? Can we quantify what good logistics performance overall would mean? They looked at something called the World Bank Logistics Performance Index, which ranks countries or previously ranked countries overall by performance. They calibrated against the economic model to understand where we are in the table and what that might mean for our performance and the opportunity to improve. They found, I'll show on the next slide, that we'd slipped significantly down the table over the last 10 years, and therefore the opportunity to get back up the table by improving our logistics performance could deliver a material economic benefit, which they found to be up to £8 billion a year in productivity-led growth. So that's economy-wide, not specific to this sector, but it shows that there's a prize to be had for all of us on getting the conditions for logistics as conducive for efficiency as possible. So what are the things that drive logistics performance? Business costs and investment, typical for most sectors. The lower the input costs, the more efficient the business can be. Infrastructure quality and capacity, that's a big deal for logistics compared to maybe some other sectors. We do really need the roads and the railways to work well, and increasingly the energy infrastructure to work well too. Like all sectors, we need access to skills. But as we heard in the last panel, it's a sector that is changing rapidly with a lot of new innovation coming forward, and that's changing the skill set needs. So we not just need access to people coming into the sector, but the ability to rapidly train people in new ways of doing things, whether they're joining the sector early or part of the way through their career. And we need the crossing of borders to be easier. And that's one of the things that, because of EU exit, has got harder. And one of the things that dragged us down the logistics performance index. But the more we can reduce trade friction, the more efficient logistics can be, and the more productive the sectors that rely on us can be. So these are those stats on what's not going so well. The stats at the top are from the 2014 and 2023 logistics performance indexes. Unfortunately, they've changed their model now, so instead of putting you in a simple ranking, there's now lots and lots of different indices to look at without it being grouped in that way. So I don't think we'll have that grouping again, but you can see we dropped from 4th, so pretty good, world leader, not the world leader, but up there, to joint 19th. And then I've looked at the more recent performance index that's come out, which doesn't do that simple ranking, but does have lots of different indices to look at. And 3 that I picked out that seemed most relevant for this sector are lead time to import from the port of origin to destination, turnaround time at ports, and container import dwell time. So a lot of the stats in the performance index are about that international movement. I'll talk about domestic in a moment. So you can see on the lead time of the first one, the UK was at 31 days, where the best in class was at 15. The turnaround time at ports was a day, and the best in class was less than a day. And container import dwell time was 4 days, where the best is 1 day. Now, this isn't all a comment on the ports themselves. It's often a factor of customs arrangements and paperwork, as well as the domestic quality of the domestic connectivity on the inland side of things. I mean, if you we talked about rail a moment ago. One of the things the big ports will point out a lot is their rail connectivity is not as good as they would want it to be, which limits the amount of rail freight capacity they can get efficiently in and out of the port, not just the amount, but the amount per day. So that takes us on to the domestic picture. This is some work we did with a consultancy called MDS Transmodal about 18 months ago to try and do a couple of things, to understand what are the key logistics routes in the country, and then on the next slide, where are the issues. And so the main map in the middle there is, see the actual geographic map. The blue lines are the key road routes used by logistics. The ones, you can't quite see it on the screen there, but the ones more in the centre of the country are a fatter blue line. It's the more intensively used ones. All of the blue lines on that map are really important routes for logistics, and obviously there's lots of roads shown that aren't on there, so it didn't come out as as important. The rail is in red, and then what we call principal ports for logistics are the ones that have got pie charts around the country, and then there are also I think 3 airports picked out as particularly crucial for the sector: Heathrow, Stansted, and East Midlands Gateway. Sorry, East Midlands Airport at East Midlands Gateway. And then on the right, because we had a sort of idea of, we're always trying to think about how do we better communicate what logistics is all about, was our attempt at simplifying that, partly sort of thinking about, well, I mean, it seems a bit old hat now, that people understood what the HS2Y network looked like. It was like a Y. It's not anymore. It's just the bottom of, I don't know what it is now, an I. So we were thinking, okay, what does the logistics look like? And we think, well, it's that sort of funny red spatula in the middle, really. Goods coming in and out largely from the southeast, unsurprising given where Europe and the rest of the world is compared to us. Either making their way up or down the Midlands to the Golden Triangle, with some key routes in going up to the north west and Yorkshire as well. And then some of you can't, if you look, this report's available on our website if you look up UK Logistics Network. One of the other things it found is it maps the main warehouses in the country, where the main storage is. It is on the map in the middle. We can't quite see it. It's some faint blue discs. But we also looked at where that is growing, and that is growing, unsurprisingly to those in this room, more in the middle of the country. And it is partly doing that compared to the northwest, for example, because of constraints on the railway, mean that if you want a modern, well-connected logistics site, the middle of the country is really good for you, and the lack of rail capacity up to the northwest, mentioned HS2 a minute ago, constraints around there, means that there is some sort of, the investment in scale is sort of coming a bit more into the middle of the country. So these are some of those issues. Left is rail, and the right is road. The red lines on the left are where rail freight growth is expected to be over the coming years, but that's kind of expected if it was market-led and not particularly constrained by physical circumstances, by the infrastructure. But that's sort of where the demand should take it. And the red spots on it are points of significant congestion that are holding that back. The red line that's diagonal, sort of on the left going that way, that's the West Coast Main Line. We can see there's a blob there called Shugborough Tunnel. That's sort of the area of tracking where there's a lot of congestion there. And then there's another blob in the middle of Manchester which also affects it. But essentially there are some key constraints that are affecting how much we can use rail. And then on the right, we've got the most intensively used road routes, and again the blobs are where there are particular points of congestion around the M25. That blob there, we hope, would be relieved by the Lower Thames crossing, but also, some key factors in a similar place to, areas where there's issues on the railway as well. So I guess the point here is if we want really efficient logistics, we need to deal with some of these issues, and we need to keep lobbying the government to support that, because they don't get quite the traction that things that affect public transport and motorists get in the discourse about transport. On to skills and workforce constraints. We've got some gaps in this area that you'll be aware of. The driver gap is sort of famous, but it's not the only one. There are gaps in vehicle technicians as well. Our members through our annual survey have been reporting acute gaps in that space for a long time. At the same time, factors affecting job quality and attractiveness do continue to play a role in inhibiting the levels of employment the sector has generally wanted to see. Poor driver facilities across the country are an issue there. That's something we talk to the government a lot about, because that often comes down to planning and local authorities not progressing planning quick enough or at all for the facilities that we want to see happen. There are skills gaps growing in the areas newer to logistics, so vehicle technicians around electric and alternatively fueled vehicles, and also the digital systems there. Not surprising, a new area, and therefore there is a constraint. But the skill system in terms of apprenticeships is laggy, so that's a challenge. And also just simply awareness of the sector, and young people not being as aware of the logistics sector as other sectors, which hampers things. That's why we started a campaign with a lot of the sector a few years ago called Generation Logistics, which is all about encouraging young people to consider a career in logistics, and that's through a lot of social media, as well as increasingly communication directly with careers advisors. And also, given the challenge with NEETs at the moment, working a lot with DWP to try and think about how to strengthen connections between young people out of work and the sector, although that is a challenge at the moment, given the economy is quite flat and there isn't a huge amount of employment going on at the moment in terms of expansion. Touching on a more recent challenge that we've all had, the Iran conflict had a significant impact on the sector. It's something that we've been talking to our members pretty intensively about, surveying them about, going to Number 10 to talk to them about, and others. Actually, there was some small group of logistics SMEs in Number 10 yesterday to talk about this. It's obviously the main issue is that it's pushed up significantly the price of diesel by around 30%. A stat we've been quoting a lot is the average price of filling up a HGV has gone from about, there's no such thing as an average HGV, but to simplify things, from about £700 to about £1,000. And for some businesses, particularly SMEs, that's meant that they've crossed their normal credit threshold with fuel cards and other measures like that, where they can afford it, they can pass the cost on to their customers, but they just simply can't get the credit to use all of their vehicles. So there's been a reduction in capacity as well as a result of that. Obviously, there was a lot of impact early on flights, which has had a sort of cost impact through the system, as well as the price associated with international container shipping, with more shipping going around the Cape of Good Hope rather than the Strait of Hormuz. So that all hasn't led to shortages, has led to price increases. So is the government listening to any of this? We think it is. We've got a support package from the Middle East conflict around fuel duty, HGV road tax, as well as red diesel for rail freight. There is progress going on in the infrastructure space. I mentioned Heathrow a moment ago and Lower Thames Crossing. The A66 work across the Pennines is also crucial for the sector. You'll have heard the government's got strong aspirations for a closer trading relationship with Europe. It wants to start eroding some of the frictions that we've had for the last, since the end of the transition period, the Brexit transition period. It is reforming the apprenticeship system with apprenticeship units. That could be positive, but we need more short courses that are relevant to our sector. And we are working with the Department for Transport on a new freight plan, but I could have said the same thing a year ago. It's not here yet. The Chancellor's listening. We had our annual conference the other day, and we asked her for a positive message about the sector to share with the sector, so there you go. That was, I think, for us, a sign of progress that we didn't get just a response saying, talk to the Department for Transport. They said, of course. We've done quite a bit of engagement with the Chancellor, and she does recognise that the sector is integral to the economy. It isn't just a transport issue, it is a growth issue. But obviously there is more to do. Here's a range of things that we've been calling for, particularly in the conflict context, but not only, that would help with the costs for the sector around fuel, electricity, low-carbon fuels, moving to zero-emission vehicles. Business rates is a real challenge. That's gone in the wrong direction this year with a higher multiplier for higher-value sites, and wanting a longer-term approach to mode shift grants. And then here are some of the things that, stepping away from the Iran conflict, that are also really important to us. They relate to a lot of what I've said around investment, planning, reducing border friction, reforming the skills system, and also, crucially, from a cost perspective, having a fair decarbonisation transition. It's something that a lot of the sector's already getting on with, but it does add cost, and we also need to make sure it is done in such a way that the infrastructure is there to support it. There's room for more specificity there in policy terms. That's why I wanted to share with you today. That's our strapline, nothing moves without logistics, including the automotive sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Have a seat. Thank you very much.